Welcome to Issues That Matter. I'm Cynthia Pooler. My guest today is Diane Sare, and and I are going to talk about our dear friend Scott Ritter. I first started communicating with Scott quite a while back, and we did some shows together when I was just doing audio. And then when I did video, and then the war started in Ukraine, and he was very gracious. I would contact him, and we would do shows. Whenever more than you know, well, he would do shows whenever I would ask him. It's been a wonderful friendship. I've learned a lot from Scott, and I appreciate everything he's doing. Unfortunately, the world doesn't see what we see. So, Diane, tell us uh your initial encounters with Scott.
I actually met him at a rally in Kingston, and I understand he's going to be organizing another one on September 28th, which really everybody should come to. His Project Dawn, it's called, which is to force the presidential candidates to take a stand against nuclear war, which makes sense to me, because if we don't stop nuclear war, there's not going to be much else worth debating.
Right.
So I was as I was running against Chuck Schumer at the time, and I had always wanted to meet Scott. I had been following his coverage of the Russia-Ukraine I think the invasion had happened, or the special military operation to be precise. Also, I'd known of his work for many years because he was one of the few truth tellers about the Iraq war, that there were no weapons of mass destruction. And I'd been following him on Facebook and eager to meet him. So I was really happy to get to meet him at that rally. And
Oh,
then later, it turned out that the Ukrainian, and we'll get to this, I think the Center for Countering Disinformation, which is funded and supported by the US State Department, he and I both had our names, along with Helga Tsepp-LaRouche and a bunch of people who'd spoken at a Schiller Institute conference, on a Center for Countering Disinformation list. And Scott wrote a very strong article in Consortium News and made the point that this was a kill list, which I thought, okay, it's a hit list for harassment. Do you really mean that? And then that list became a feeder for another list, Mirotvorets, which is a really ominous list, which Scott also is on, where they get all kinds of your personal details, childhood photographs, your home address, your home phone number, and they have all these pictures and materials so people can identify you. And on the Mirotvorets list, when they eliminate you, i.e. assassinate, murder, blow up, they put in red letters "liquidated" over your face.
oh
So
my
it's
God.
very clear. And of course, Daria Dugina, the daughter of Alexandra Dugin in Russia, was blown up in a car bomb, and they did that to her, uh, put that over her face. So it's clear that this was a real, very real threat. And then Scott wrote an op-ed, really an open letter. He had sent an open letter to Schumer and Gillibrand demanding to know if the US government was funding this assault on free speech against Americans. And then after we met, he also made it even stronger, because he said to Schumer, "Is this how you silence your political opponent? Diane Sare is a candidate. She's running against you, and now you've allowed her name to be placed on a kill list by a group of neo-Nazis in Ukraine," and demanded a further investigation. So that was how our collaboration began, I should say.
What I admire most about Scott is the fact that in the face of all of these threats and taking away his passport and seizing his house and everything. He won't, he won't be silent. He keeps on talking. And it's truly amazing how many people would have enough guts to do what Scott does every single day. Would you agree?
Well, not that many. That's why the latest list, Texty, which is only a list of Americans, has only 390 people on it. So that's 390 Americans out of what, 350 million people? What is that, a tenth of 1% or something? Or 100th of 1%. So that's obviously not very many people. And he is rightfully angry about this. And I do want to talk about this because I think the most important thing that people can do is to shut down this criminal apparatus and make the in so-called intelligence agencies, this combined monolith of MI6, CIA, and Mossad, as someone told me recently, which is sort of obvious, frankly. They shouldn't be allowed to do this. They should pay for this in a certain way by losing their credibility. Why do people take them serious? Why do we believe that Iran is hacking Donald Trump's emails? Why would Iran be interested? And we know from another friend of mine, William Binney, who's a whistleblower from the NSA, that from the Vault 7 files, they learned that the CIA has the ability to create fake IP addresses. So they can, and there's a number of nations which they can make. Iran, all of the ones on our hit parade, Iran, Russia, China, Cuba, Venezuela, North Korea. So they can make it appear as though Iran or Russia or China is hacking into you when it's actually the CIA doing it.
What is really upsetting is the fact that, well, you speak up, I speak up a little bit, Scott speaks up, and there's a handful of people that are out there doing this every day, but it's only a handful. And when you compare it to the crap that you hear on the mainstream media, it's like it's mind-boggling. And how many people really fall for it? How many people really don't know? They think, Kamala is great, blah, blah, blah. But she doesn't articulate issues about NATO. She doesn't articulate issues about nuclear war. But you do, Scott does, but the majority of people do not.
Well,
And they, and
another
they,
person who does is Tulsi Gabbard. And you
correct,
saw what happened to her, right? She's now on a terrorist watch list.
right. And the average person doesn't know what's truly going on. And with so few voices, we're being drowned out by the mainstream media. And, Scott does this every day, and you do this every day, and it's so commendable.
Well, I would put it a little different. They're not succeeding at drowning us out. That's the point. What was the power of the little boy in the parade when he said the emperor is naked? That was one voice, but everyone knew it was true, so it resonated. And that's what they fear. I mean, why would they spend so much money? Scott, I heard him say, I think it was 30 or 40 FBI agents to raid his house. How much do these people get paid per hour? And they were there for 5.5 hours. So
Right.
supposing they get paid, I don't know what they get paid, $50 an hour. Let's be, so 50 times 5, let's say it's $250 an hour or $250 per person. And there's 40 of them there, that's what, $10,000 or something, to do this raid. And then they're going to be paying people all these wages to go through it. And those are probably higher salaries as the people who are actually going to be combing through his personal cell phone and his laptop. I mean, it is outrageous. Just Tulsi Gabbard is currently active duty. She's a lieutenant colonel in the National Guard. She's in the Congress and she ran for president. Is this woman going to blow up an airplane? I think not, but they are insisting on deploying federal air marshals to travel with her whenever she gets on a plane to monitor whether she brushes her teeth or not during the flight. And then you have this incredible expenditure against Scott, former U.S. Marine intelligence officer, UN weapons inspector. I certainly have no question about his loyalty to the United States, and he said it very explicitly. In fact, when he came back from Russia, I think in one of his interviews, if there ever came to be an actual conflict between Russia and the United States, he's an American. That's
Mhm.
who he's loyal to. But he's also loyal, more importantly, to truth. And
Mhm.
this is what's not allowed. Now, I do want to say something about the timing of this, if you don't mind, because there's a shift potentially going on in Ukraine.
Okay.
And I think it may be related to their desire to go after Scott Ritter right now. The Russian Foreign Intelligence Service, or SVR, is saying that they think Zelensky is going to be replaced. The West doesn't consider him to be a viable leader. He's really corrupt. He's a drug addict. He's siphoning off a lot of money. So they would like to, when they get to the negotiations, because obviously Ukraine is losing the war no matter what you say, or whatever NBC says or the New York Times, Ukraine is losing this war. They are going to lose. And there is going to come a time when it looks like Russia, since no one was willing to take up Putin's offer of June 14th for a negotiated end, Russia's going to be determining the terms to the end. So they want to replace Zelensky. Now, who is the guy they're talking about replacing him with? It is a fellow named Arsen, Arsen, not like an arsonist, but that might be appropriate. Arsen Avakov, Avakov. Who is Arsen Avakov? He was a close chum of Victoria Nuland, going
Oh,
back to the Maidan. He also personally, now these guys are all egomaniacs, so maybe it's a slight exaggeration, but he takes credit for helping to organize the Azov Brigade, the terrorist brigades who wear the swastikas and tattoos of Adolf Hitler on their arms. So this guy was the organizer of that. And he was one of the founders of the Marat Feretz kill list, which I was just speaking about. And not only that, in 2018, he came to Washington, was warmly received by members of the US Congress, including Devin Nunes, who's no longer there, and Marcy Kaptur of Ohio, who has done some useful things on backing, but apparently supports the fascist, she's Ukrainian American, supports fascist elements in Ukraine. And Avakov also met with the director of the FBI, Christopher Wray, and signed a whole bunch of agreements, specifically a memorandum on mutual cooperation with the director of the USA Federal Bureau of Investigation. That was 2018. And the amazing thing about this is that 2018 was the year that 40 members of the US Congress wrote a letter saying the Azov Brigade is neo-Nazi. And the US, if we're going to arm Ukraine, okay, fine, but no weapons should go to the Azov Brigade at the very same time that the head of the FBI is signing a memorandum of understanding with the founder of the Azov Battalion, Arsen Avakov.
wow.
So I would posit that this may have something to do with the FBI appearance at the home of Scott Ritter.
But prior to that, when he was boarding the plane, he was going to take a trip to Russia to work on his film in Russia, and and his passport was seized. And
Yeah,
somebody asked him, did they have a warrant for that? He said no, they had guns. That's
right.
frightening.
Yeah,
And then with his home, you know, they wanted to have a SWAT team come in, and thankfully he was friendly with the Bethlehem police. And if there was any animosity between Scott and the Bethlehem police, he might not be breathing right now. Would you agree?
yeah, I would agree. That's
Yeah.
look, these people are killers. We are arming the most unsavory people all over the world, from the neo-Nazi regiments in Ukraine who committed horrific war crimes against the Russians. People saw the pictures of the Russian prisoners they took who were shot in the back of the head, to the Israeli, the IDF, who think it's legitimate to rape prisoners of war who are killing tens of thousands of children. And, we just sent another $18 billion worth of military equipment to Israel. That was approved yesterday. Uh, so look at who we're supplying. These people have no conscience, or if they did, they've been put on various kinds of drugs to dull it out so they can carry out the most unbelievable atrocities. And I think we're entering a new phase in the United States. Remember, the media doesn't want to discuss it, but the leading presidential contender, Donald Trump, was nearly assassinated on July 13th.
Mm-hmm.
And what was the Secret Service excuse? They couldn't be on the roof because the roof was too steep. Completely not credible. So I think it's a very dangerous time. I think patriots have to rally to the defense of Scott. They have to rally to demand a full investigation of what happened. How was this assassination of a presidential candidate, attempted assassination, allowed to occur? And it would be destabilizing if they were to attack Kamala Harris or Robert Kennedy Jr. There's another big attack. And of course, Scott was with Robert Kennedy in the courtroom the day before the FBI came to Scott's
Right.
door. And what was the hearing about? The Democratic Party. I think they really have to change their name to the Totalitarian Party. But the Democratic Party was filing a lawsuit through one of their PACs to have Kennedy thrown off the New York ballot, claiming that he doesn't reside in New York, even though the New York address he used apparently is his legal address for everything, including he's registered to vote there. My husband and I just decided to look it up, and he is registered to vote there. So, what is this? And his supporters, I know how hard it is personally to get on the ballot. They worked hard to get him on the ballot. Yes, they had some paid petitioners, but the volunteers got tens of thousands of signatures aside from the paid petitioners. So to throw him off the ballot is despicable. So you see, it's a series of things. It's not isolated. And by the way, Cynthia, I put out a post on X two days ago saying that about the Kursk invasion by the Ukrainians. They caught Russia off guard. That was bad. That was a mistake on the part of Russia. They killed a bunch of people. The Russians are dealing with it. They're still winning the war. Um, I put out a tweet saying that I was concerned that this invasion would allow people within Russia who think Putin has not been harsh enough, to put more pressure on Putin to make a brash move, to cause him to stumble, to do something in response to this. And I said, Putin is going to be very measured because he knows that the American leadership is completely insane. We don't even know who is running the United States, and we have nuclear weapons. So he is trying not to trigger who knows what, an out of control reaction from the crazy people over on this side of the Atlantic. Now that post has about 250,000 views, and I'm getting trolled by NAFO. If you know what that is, have you heard of NAFO?
No, no.
It is one of its leaders is the former Congressman Adam Kinzinger.
Okay.
North American Fellas Organization. It's a bunch of supporters of the Azov regiment, supporters of the Ukrainian kill list. So they have been attacking me left and right, saying that I should be barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen, which I found very hilarious. I told the guy who posted that I found it rather flattering, except I'm not that good of a cook. And then, but they also started posting a bunch of photographs of me and Scott together, these harassers. So they're desperate. They are really desperate. And it is they've picked on the wrong person in the case of Scott because he's not going to shrivel up and cower in the corner. And we have to fight, and the American people have to really demand that our Congress stop arming fascist war criminals all over the planet.
My contention is, back in the early 2000s when there was the sting operation against Scott, and so many people believe this to this day. They can't see, they don't understand that he is trying to eliminate nuclear weapons. All they think about is uh, the sting operation that took place in the early 2000s. They don't see what he's doing at all. And as many interviews that I do with him, as many times as you're with him, it's it's pretty it's pretty frustrating.
Well, it's not that they don't see, I think they're also cowards. I don't know if you saw the response of Gilbert Doctorow, who has had very respectable analysis on the situation with regard to Russia, Ukraine. And he basically wrote a piece saying, well, let me be contrarian. Scott really should have registered as a foreign agent, and he should never have allowed anyone else to pay for his trips to Russia. And to me, that just says not that the guy doesn't know what Scott is doing. He's just a coward. He's just scared. And he wants to make sure that everyone knows, oh, look, I'm keeping my nose clean. I know we have a fascist dictatorship that's going to plunge us into thermonuclear war, but don't come after me, right? That doesn't work. If we have a nuclear war, we all die. So people are afraid of the wrong thing. What is the point of taking care of your own ugly rear end when all life on the planet is threatened, including yours?
I spoke to a friend the other day, and that person told me, well, I've never given to a political campaign before, but I've given to Harris because I'm so afraid of Trump getting back in, and they have Trump as this boogeyman who's gonna eliminate democracy. Well, what people don't understand is this election is so horrendous. Not only democracy will end, but this entire planet will be blown up. We'll all die, and this beautiful planet with the mountains and the oceans and the trees and everything will be gone. Will be gone, and that's what Scott is trying to get people to understand, and hopefully by us talking about it, maybe we can enlighten them a little bit.
I would hope so. I also want to bring in another element, which I heard Scott referencing on an interview he did yesterday, which is the BRICS. I mean, part of the reason for this rage fit, and these people are really at risk. They're going way out on a limb, attacking innocent, patriotic Americans in the way that they are, calling them terrorists and information terrorists and so on, is that there is a new paradigm coming into being. I mean, forced it. We forced them by throwing Russia out of the SWIFT system, by using the dollar as a weapon of war, an economic weapon. So China, Russia, India, Brazil, South Africa, those are the 5 original BRICS nations. are set up a new development bank. They have invited, and have joined Saudi Arabia, Iran, United Arab Emirates, Egypt, and Ethiopia. And there are many more nations on a waiting list. Turkey has said they want to join the BRICS. Now, how can they be in NATO and be with the BRICS? I don't know. Maybe NATO is going to fall apart. Other nations, Venezuela is talking about joining the BRICS. So you have coming into being a new arrangement of nations, which is not interested in what Biden, in his senile rage fits, called the rules-based order, where some guy makes up arbitrary rules, and if you don't obey them, you don't tie your shoes at 4 p.m. on Wednesday, that they will come and blow you up. So, and the interesting thing about the BRICS dynamic and also China's Belt and Road, China isn't running over to African nations telling them what form of government they should have or who their president should be. They're saying, you know what, we could really benefit by doing trade with you. So why don't we finance a new deep water port, like in Mombasa, Kenya? Because we have need for more agriculture. You probably would like some advanced technical goods. And not only that, we're going to build a vocational technical school to create a whole generation of Kenyans who can run this infrastructure yourself, because we're not interested in occupying your country. Now, that is so not part of the Anglo-Dutch colonial model. No one here can make sense of it. They say, oh, the Chinese, they're the biggest threat. They're trying to take over. No, we just lost our identity as Americans. We were the first anti-colonial revolution, our nation. And we are now the enforcers of colonialism all over the planet. It's a horrible shift. And you have, the patriots, myself, Scott, yourself, Tulsi, other people who are saying, hey, wait a minute. Why is China our enemy? Why is Russia our enemy? Why do we need enemies? Maybe we should rethink this whole thing.
Let me ask you a question. When you encounter people who are buying into the narrative that they hear on television, if you want to talk to them about what's real, the chances are they're not going to listen. Are you wasting your breath?
I think you have to judge it. Sometimes you are, and sometimes you aren't. I did a radio interview with a SUNY, I forget, a university out of Nassau, community college, actually.
Okay.
And the radio host had the whole line on Ukraine. And I was, and this was being recorded. We couldn't redo it or edit it. And I was somewhat stunned. He never heard of the Azov Battalion. He didn't know that we overthrew the government of Ukraine in 2014. I mean, really, he was starting just from what's in the mainstream press today. And to his credit, as we talked it through, he said at the end of it, he said, I'm going to go look some of these things up that you said. Now he's a radio show host, so he probably has an interest in not being shown to be a complete ignoramus. So he decided he would look them up. Other people who have bad blood, who are criminal, may not. I had an experience yesterday. This was really interesting. I was over by the United Nations. We're demanding that Resolution 377 be invoked. That gives the General Assembly the ability to override the Security Council. So they could override the US veto. They could send peacekeepers to stop this genocide in Gaza. So we were there with a camp literature table, and I called out to this man, "Are you for peace?" And he said, "Where?" And he asked me where. I said, "Everywhere." He said, "Well, not with Israel, not in Israel." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "They should kill them all 2 million. And he storms off. And my husband, who has a little bit of a temper, was trying to argue with him. I said, just stop, because one of these guys had come back and threatened that he was going to bring a crew and beat everybody up and flatten our table and whatever else. So I just said, just be quiet, let him go, right? The guy came back, and I wasn't there, but he came back to the table to apologize to me. That's shocking. But it just shows you, I think you don't know who's going to be capable of change, who's going to be capable of self-reflection. Sometimes, obviously, if someone's threatening to beat the crap out of you, you probably don't want to have an argument with them.
Right.
I mean, Scott might, he's strong, he's trained. I'm not. Um, but a lot of people, I'm telling you, it's fear. It's fear. People know better. The overwhelming majority of Americans don't think we should allow Israel to continue slaughtering children in Gaza. They don't. But they look at AIPAC calling everyone anti-Semitic and painting them as terrorist supporters. And then they just say, well, I'll just be quiet.
Mm.
But you
So,
saw what happened. I have to say, Ilhan Omar won her primary.
yes, I saw that. I saw that, which is interesting. Um, so in the final moments of our little conversation, describe first of all, describe your friendship with Scott.
Well, I would say we're comrades in arms. We're on the same side in a war for the United States. We have agreements and we have disagreements. There are some things that we have pretty strong disagreements about, but both of us have a certain respect for people with courage, people who are fighters, and his voice is unique. We play different roles. He is an expert on weapons. He's an expert on Russia. So he has a very important role to play in this crisis. I'm a candidate for office. So I have a different kind of role to play, which is really to make that shift that you're talking about in public opinion, to
Right.
provide leadership and to provide an alternative so that people don't have to vote for the same politicians that are going to get us all blown up, like Kirsten Gillibrand, who's smack in the middle of this military industrial intelligence agency monolith.
And the reason I call Scott my friend is I remember back in the early 2000s seeing him on the Phil Donahue show and talking about no weapons of mass destruction. And then I friended him on Facebook, which, yeah, I was surprised when he friended me back. Then we started doing audio interviews, and now it's YouTube videos. But you and I have both dined with him, and when I had called him to sign your petition, he was right there. He did it, and to me, somebody who has the gumption to speak out against all odds, to me, is worthy of friendship. That's how I feel.
Yep, I
Yep.
agree.
So Diane, I've got to run, and I'm sure you do too. So we'll talk again, and hopefully a lot of people will see this and that realize the importance of somebody like Scott, who is not afraid to speak out. I think the majority of people might have leanings towards, oh, maybe he's right, but keep their mouths shut. Would you agree?
Yep.
So, I wonder when, they seized his phone, they seized his computer. I don't know if when he'll get that back, if his September 28th uh, thing will even come to pass. What do you think?
Oh, it's going to come to pass.
Oh, okay.
And whether he's able to be there or not, which I think he will, I think he's pretty determined to be there. And these people don't have a leg to stand on, so they're just making stuff up. Uh, but either way, there's going to be a lot of people in support of his idea that the number one issue of this election is to not have a nuclear war. We can disagree on everything else, but let's be alive. The first requisite is we have to be alive to have a disagreement.
Right. So, Diane, we shall talk again. You've been listening to Diane Sare. I'm Cynthia Pooler. This is Issues That Matter. If you like this show, please subscribe to my YouTube channel and please look at the other channels in which Scott is on and listen carefully to what he's got to say. It's really important. Thanks, Diane. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Have a great day.